by Jan Richardson. It's called Beloved is Where We Begin. If you would enter into the wilderness, do not begin without a blessing. Do not leave without hearing who you are, beloved, named by the one who has traveled this path before you. Do not go without letting it echo in your ears. And if you find it is hard to let it into your heart, do not despair. This is what this journey is for. I cannot promise this blessing will free you from danger, from fear, from hunger or thirst, from the scorching sun or the fall of night. But I can tell you that on this path, there will be help. I can tell you that on this way, there will be rest. I can tell you that you will know the strange graces that come to our aid only on the road such as this, that fly to meet us bearing comfort and strength, that come alongside us for no other cause than to lean themselves toward our ear and with their curious instincts whisper our name, beloved, beloved, beloved.
Would you pray with me? Divine Essence, open our hearts to feel your presence, to recognize our belovedness on all of these crazy journeys that we're on. Let us be strengthened and given courage, comforted through this time together. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your grace and your wisdom. Amen. So as I said, I'll be preaching for the next couple of weeks on blessings. And today it's blessings for the journey. Let's flesh out blessings just a little bit more before we dig into this. So with the kids, I said it was something good or helpful. How else do you think of a blessing? Because they know there are multiple ways of sort of looking at it.
A gift.
A gift. That's a good way. Is that what you said too? I got a gift from both sides. Stereo gifts. What else? Teresa wants to say something. She just can't get it out.
Joy.
Joy. Sure. A blessing is joy. When we think about it in spiritual terms, people sometimes think of it as maybe God's favor, right? That somehow God is bestowing upon us something favorable. I read a definition that said that a blessing is something that is infused with holiness. Isn't that a wonderful way to think of it? Something that's infused with holiness, which means it can be anything. It can be music. It can be the trees and outside. It can be a conversation with a friend. So many things can then be defined as blessing. So I chose, it seemed like a good way to start the summer to talk about blessings on the journey. And obviously we got one journey with the kids, the journey of a vacation. But what other kinds of journeys do we go on? Not all of them are easy. Spiritual journeys, absolutely. So where we're asking questions, or we're doubting, or we're struggling with who and what God is and trying to come to deeper understandings.
Journey through an illness.
A journey through an illness. Absolutely. So a journey of healing, or a journey of wholeness. Relationships. In many different ways. Friendships, marriages, relationships with our children, with our parents. All kinds of different journeys there. Jerry?
Aging.
Aging. Yes. I talked about this at St. Monica's a couple of days ago, and they said the journey of being elderly. So, you're not quite there yet, Jerry, by the way. That's the next one for you to look forward to.
I think I am.
Let me take my foot out of my mouth. Roxanne,
Your authentic self.
your authentic self. Yes, the journey to find our true selves.
Education.
Education, a journey of learning and discovery.
Blessings are memories as you age.
Blessings are memories as you age. Remember that, Jerry. So the question is, what journeys are there any other journeys you can think of? I think you did pretty good.
Work into retirement.
Journey of work, the journey of work into retirement. Journeys are often transitional times, whether you're having a child or graduating a child or marrying off a child, getting married yourself or having children. There's so many life stage journeys that we have. So good. Journeys are not always easy. I don't want to talk about blessings simply to, I don't want that to imply that life isn't difficult. You had a microphone in our line of sight there, John. I know that life right now is really, in general, difficult. It's hard to watch the news. It's hard to see the things that are going on. It's horrific in some cases. Despairing, we feel hopeless, we feel overwhelmed and distraught and distressed, and I know all of that's out there. I know we all feel all of it. And these conversations about blessings are not to deny any of that, but it's to suggest that even in the midst of all of that, if we open our eyes and look around, as David Steindl-Rast said, blessings are the lifeblood flowing through the universe. It's that grounding of our being that's under all things, along with love and light and the divine. So, trying to draw us back to that in the midst of the chaos, okay? So she begins, I use simply this poem as sacred reading because I didn't feel like it could get any better than this. I didn't feel like I could find a Bible reading that said this as beautifully as Jan Richardson said it, and as nicely as Jim read it this morning. She begins by saying, if you would go into the wilderness. This is about the only piece I take a little bit of issue with in this reading, because it suggests that our journeys are voluntary. And some of our journeys are just not voluntary. They're not something that we would choose, they're not something we want, and if we could run from them, we would. I think about my father, whom all of you know about 2.5 years ago had a stroke. She probably could have seen it coming and done something about it. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things where in the blink of an eye, one's life changes completely. And suddenly he didn't know what a banana was. And he finds himself in a month of intensive rehab, and then having to get rid of most of his stuff and move up here into a one-room place at St. Monica's. That's a journey that he was thrust into, not one he asked for. And there are lots of those kinds of journeys, I'm afraid, in our lifetimes. So there are those, and then there are the journeys that we choose. And even some of the journeys we choose aren't the easiest journeys to go on. Hopefully they're bringing us to a healthier, better place, but some of those journeys are really tough. So she begins by saying, okay, if you're going to go on a journey, if you're going to go into the wilderness, into the unknown, into uncertainty, take a blessing with you. And remember that the blessing starts with you being called beloved. That the divine looks at each and every one of us and says, you are the beloved. What does beloved mean? It's a weird word, isn't it? How many of us use beloved in our daily language? Julie, you are my beloved. It means somebody we cherish, right? Someone who's close to our hearts, someone who's the dearest person to us. So think about who you would call beloved for a second. There are probably lots of people that you love in your life, lots of people you care for, but who is like top of your list, the most beloved person in your life? Thank you. And then recognize that the divine calling us beloved is far deeper and more perfect than anything we could feel for our most beloved. Because face it, as much as we try to love them well, we ain't perfect, right? Maybe one of you is, and I'm missing it, and if so, I bow down to you. But Julie will be the first to tell you that I am not perfect. As much as I would love to always love unconditionally, all of you, and Julie, and my kids, we all, I think, have moments of judgment, whether we want to or not, whether it comes out of our mouths or not. We all experience things like, jealousy and anger and frustration and things that we just can't let go of. Maybe in our impatience, we say things that we probably shouldn't say. So as much as our beloved is like top of the world to all of us, the love that we get from the divine, that energy that flows through all things, the blessing that is the lifeblood of the universe is so much bigger and so much more that it's almost incomprehensible. But that's what accompanies us on all of these crazy journeys. So take just 15 seconds, okay? We're going to be quiet for 15 seconds. Think about what is the journey that you are on right now. Okay, so keep that in mind as we talk. That's your journey for today, or maybe this week, or maybe this year. But there will be more, and sometimes we're on multiple journeys at the same time. So not only do we start by remembering that we are the beloved, but then she says, remember that even though you're the beloved, this does not guarantee that this path is going to be easy, whatever this path is. It doesn't guarantee there won't be danger. It doesn't guarantee, metaphorically, you won't hunger and thirst or get burned by the scorching sun or get caught in the fall of night. Journeys can be hard. And while we invite a blessing and we understand that we're being upheld on the journey, it doesn't mean that it's easy. As Julie tells me all the time, she says, they don't have an easy button. Well, there are some journeys where there just isn't an easy button. And we just keep going through, trusting that we are the beloved. And as she says, we're not walking alone, but we will find help. So that's one of those things, you will find help on your journey. So when I was 26, thanks, Jim. Jim said long time ago, for those of you on Zoom. I don't get mad. I just get even, so. Where was I? Long time ago. When I was 26. I finally decided that I should listen to the crazy voice in my head that was telling me that I should go to seminary. Now let me tell you, this was not a journey I wanted to go on. I ignored it for years. I brushed it off for years. I didn't want my life to change. I didn't want my marriage to change. I didn't want to drag my kids to all kinds of different towns and churches and who knew what. And on top of it, it was crazy. I'd never really read the Bible. I'd only taught a preschool Sunday school class, and anybody can talk about Noah and the ark. Never been on a church committee, and maybe that was why I actually went to seminary, because after you serve on a few church committees, you're like, oh, hell, I ain't never doing that again. So, I didn't want to go, and I kept hearing this call to go on this journey. And then I went and talked to some female pastors, and I'm like, should I do this? Is this worth it? What's this like? And they went, oh, it's awful. It's just really, really hard. I'm like, but I'm worried about my family. Well, you should be worried about your family. I got pure, honest truth is what I got, which is what I asked for. But pretty much I spent a lot of time crying before going on that journey. And so I went. So I enrolled in seminary. Now, if I thought in my naivete that God was simply going to bless me and make it easy from that point, that God's favor would be resting on me because I was dedicating my life to God, that was silly. Because the blessing was there, but the journey wasn't necessarily easy. I started seminary being pregnant, first of all, which is all kinds of weird things to your head and your body. And I knew nothing, so all these seminarians are like, they've been in the church forever, and here I don't know Adam from Eve. And then my brother-in-law lost all the salt in his body, went into cardiac arrest, ended up with brain damage, 24 years old, and ended up being a vegetable. But while all of that was going on, and we weren't sure if he was going to live or die, I'm in my first semester in seminary, and I'm pregnant with the first grandchild. And it was just really, really hard. But there was help on the way. I found someone who would commute with me. I was in Franklin. We commuted down to Evanston almost every day. I found other students who took pity on the poor pregnant woman and brought me food and things like that. I had professors and other supervisors who were sympathetic and were kind and listened to my questions and my tears. I had one woman who gave me this little ball. It's like one of those little tinkering balls. It makes just a really cute little twinkling sound. And she gave it to me because it would fall right where my son, my oldest, was in my stomach. And that I thought, even if with all the stress that was going on, he would have this beautiful little sound to listen to. Those were the people on the journey. And I don't remember all of their names, and I don't remember everything they did, but I know I can still feel how cared for I was. So there's help on our journeys. And then she says, you will find rest on your journeys. Well, I can tell you, I didn't rest when I was in seminary. There was no sleeping, there was no taking a couple days off. I don't think that's necessarily the kind of rest she talks about. I think she's saying that you will have moments where you're filled. Moments when you stop and suddenly you're able to breathe and you feel that joy and you feel the comfort and you know that you're held and being blessed. And so for me, it might happen, at that time, the seminary was on the lakefront, and I'd go to the lake and I'd just have a moment of peace. After my son was born, it was the moments when I was nursing. Some of those times, I would sit in chapel in seminary, and there is nothing like 150 seminarians and professors singing all in 4-part harmony without a note to look at. That just filled me. It was a moment of rest. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we're given moments of rest on the journey. And then she says, there will also be strange graces. Strange graces on our journeys. Sue Monk Kidd tells a story about sitting and watching television with their kids one afternoon after school, and suddenly they hear this horrible thump on the patio door window. And we've all heard those thumps. The thump of a poor bird hitting the window. And the three of them looked at each other, and then they crept over to the door and they looked out and they saw the poor bird out there, and they slowly opened the door and walked out. She wasn't dead. She looked like she was just stunned, just that apparently her right wing was a little droopy, but not broken. But the poor bird just sat there, looking stunned and afraid and fragile. And so Sue, my kid, said she felt so bad for this poor little bird that she got down on the ground next to it, and she slowly reached out a hand and started to stroke its feathers just a little bit, and it didn't move. But this was one of those spiritual journeys that she said she was on, and she felt as broken as that poor little bird that was sitting there at the place in her journey that she was at. And they watched the bird for the longest time, and then the kids got impatient, and they went back to their cartoons. But she sat there with this bird, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 50 minutes, before that bird finally just, cocked its head, raised its wings, and flew off. But that time was a strange grace for her. Because in her brokenness, in her own journey, she realized the wisdom of that bird, that sometimes you just need to stop and sit and be still and heal. And the other piece of it that struck her was that sometimes you need someone to sit with you. To just be still with you. That can be a healing presence. And she learned to be able to ask friends, would you just come sit with me for a little bit so I don't have to be alone. You don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything, just be still. And so that strange grace brought her that wisdom and that insight. So let me just say one other kind of, it feels like a side note, but it's really not. I was talking to a friend this last week, and he was talking about how stuck he feels a lot of people are right now. Stuck because of everything going on in the world, stuck because of COVID, stuck because of despair and, hopelessness, all of these things. He said some people just feel stuck. Well, we all get stuck sometimes. But if we get stuck for too long, either you need to see a therapist, or you need to get yourself unstuck. Sometimes we just don't want to take the journey. We avoid taking the journey and we end up stuck. And you can't be blessed on your journey if you're not actually on the journey. And every journey is a risk. I don't care what you pick. As beautiful as it may seem, there's still a risk to it. But there are blessings to them too. And so if when I asked you what journey you were on, you kind of sat there and went, no, can't think of one. Maybe you could consider if you're stuck. And if you're stuck, then is there a journey you're being called to go on that you're just avoiding? And if that's true, why are you avoiding it? And what are you afraid of? And what blessings are you missing out on because you're not risking going on the journey? So all kinds of food for thought. In sum, remember, you are beloved. Even when you don't feel like it, even when you don't act like it. You are beloved of the divine presence in and through and around all things. And you are blessed, whether you ask for it or not, those blessings are there. Even in the most difficult of journeys, the blessings are there. And you will find help, and you will find rest, and you will find strange graces along the path. Amen.